What's going on, guys? I'm Joe Farewell, and welcome back to another episode of Knowledge Nuggets presented by Atlas Gunworks. Today, we're out here at WOFT, and we're going to be building on last episode where we talked about creating distance, but this time we're talking about multiple attackers. So in today's day and age, it seems like there's more and more situations where you have multiple people committing a robbery or an assault. And in order to deal with that effectively, we have to look at some of the fundamentals of what a target transition is. Now, target transitions aren't just for competition. You can use target transitions when you have multiple targets or even a single target where your gun is on a fixed point in space and you have the target pop up or the threat pop up at another location where you're having to transition from where your focus was initially to where that new focus should be, that new threat is. So what I want to do is we're going to break down what the actual fundamentals of a transition looks like and how we can train to make sure that we're most effective in that transition process. All right, so in this scenario, we have two targets set up and they're about 4 or 5 yards apart. And we're going to look at what it takes to get the gun from target number 1 to target number 2 and how to do that as efficiently as possible. And I have a 4-step process I'm going to walk you through. But first, let's go ahead and do a couple of rounds on each target. And we're going to examine with a timer exactly how long it takes to get from one target to the next target. All right, so stand by. All right, we don't want to sacrifice accuracy while we're doing this, but we want to make sure that we're isolating the transition time. So we did 3 rounds, center mass on target 1, 3 rounds, center mass on target 2, and the time it took between those two shots was 0.38 of a second. So 38/100ths of a second to go from target 1 to target 2. A lot of people will talk to you about transitions and they say, hey, transitions only matter in competition. And yes, granted, transitions really are super important in competition. But when it comes down to self-defense, as we can see, I want to get loving, if you will, on both of these targets as quickly as possible. If I slow that process down, we're going to sacrifice performance and potentially put ourselves in greater danger. So when we're looking at getting better transitions, we want to take a look at 4 steps of the process. Step number 1, as I take the last shot on whichever my first target is to get off that target as soon as possible. So step number 1, get off target. As soon as that last shot goes off, I want to utilize the recoil, the energy that's generated in that recoil, to carry myself to the next target. Step number 2 is to get my eyes to the second target first. So as soon as I take that last shot, I'm starting to move the gun and I immediately want to get my eyes to that next target because the gun is going to stop where my eyes are looking. All right, and you can test this out. You can bring the gun up, point it at any space, and then look at some specific point and then drive the gun to your target, and your gun is actually going to stop right there. Your body knows how to do that. It's going to do that for you without you having to think about it. What happens is if you don't get your eyes in the right spot ahead of time, your gun is going to drive right past the target, and that's going to cost you time on the clock. Now, if we don't have a timer, obviously you're not going to be able to measure that, but in a self-defense situation, sooner is better when we're talking about getting rounds on target. Step number 3 is to drive the gun really hard. Okay, we want to get the gun from one target to the next target as soon as possible. And as long as we have those first 2 steps down, that 3rd step is something that we can just do as hard as we can. Our eyes are there on target. The gun is going to stop exactly where we're looking, and we're going to be able to take effective shots. Step number 4 is to be ready to shoot. Now, this is a 2-part step because we have to be ready physically, which means we have to have the trigger reset and prepped again as we come into that target. We also have to be ready mentally. So if it's a shoot situation where we have a bad guy, they're robbing us at gunpoint, we've got 2 bad guys, we've shot one, we're transitioning into another one. We want to be ready to shoot immediately with accuracy in order to get effective rounds on that target as soon as possible. So as soon as my dot gets onto that target, I want to be breaking rounds. I want to have the gun mechanically reset and prepped for an accurate shot, and I want to be mentally prepped and reset so that as soon as the dot settles on that target, I can take accurate shots and get the hits that we need to stop the threat. Now, how do we train transitions? I like to use one-shot drills, and one-shot drills are really simple because it's not a lot of ammo, and I get to analyze each step of that process without having to do elaborate setups. So the way that I do is I'll take a single shot on the very first target, and then I'll go ahead and transition. I'll analyze all 4 steps of that process. So we'll take one shot on target 1. And as I come into this one, I want to make sure that all 4 steps happen. I got off of that target early, I rode that recoil, I drove hard, I got my eyes there, and my trigger was prepped and ready to shoot as I stopped in that second target. If we see something like this, where we take a shot and I swing too far past the target, that means I didn't get my eyes there in time. If we see something like this, where I didn't have the trigger reset and prepped, that's going to slow down our process in order to take that second shot, and it's something that you should address in your training. If you want to practice this in dry fire, it's a super easy process. I highly recommend that you do so. What we're going to do is we're going to simply unload our firearm. We can do this in the comfort of our own home, but key to dry fire is making sure that it's actually dry. No ammo is allowed to be in the room, no loaded magazines in the room. We want to make sure our gun's dry. So we have an empty gun. We can go ahead and come up on target. We can prep our trigger. Don't actually take the first shot, but we'll prep our trigger. We will simulate taking a shot, release the trigger, and I'm doing this a little exaggerated so you can see my finger, but I'm going to release the trigger and prep as I come into the second target and take that second shot. Now we can do that at speed where we come up, prep the trigger, reset prep, and we want to make sure that that dot is settling onto the target effectively and we're fully prepped, ready to take that second shot. That's how I train target transitions. Again, going back to what I talked about earlier, target transitions are important even if you don't have multiple targets, because you may be pointed at the living room. For instance, if you're clearing your own house, you heard a bump in the night, you come out, you're pointing at the living room doorway, and suddenly the bad guy comes out of the kitchen. Well, the same 4 steps of that target transition apply. Where over here, we're focused on the living room, suddenly you see movement in this corner, we get off of that target, even though we didn't take that first shot, we drive hard, our eyes lead, and then we want to be ready to shoot if bad guy's a threat. That doesn't necessarily mean that you take a shot, because we have to have positive target ID, but we do want to be ready to shoot if the situation arises that we need to take that shot. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you got some good value out of that target transitions. Take a look at some of the craziness that's happening in the world right now and think about what you would do in that situation. If you want to get really good scenario training where you may have to deal with multiple threats, come out here to WOFT, get some good force-on-force training, also a low-light training, and of course get out here on the range and have fun with us out here. And if you want to run the best handguns in the world, check out Atlas Gunworks as well and get yourself some beautiful, beautiful pieces of art that also perform at a high level. I'm Joe Farewell. I hope you enjoyed this knowledge nugget. Stick around for the next one, and I'll see you on the range.